Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Today I'm with Freeha. Freeha is an Atlas Core Fellow, Class 29, serving at Women World Banking. And we'll be hosting a very interesting webinar about perception management. Freeha, hello.
Hi, Ons, and hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about perception management. And the background of this topic is the post from one of my Class 29 fellow Esther that she posted a picture, and everyone just made a congratulation remarks or comment against that post instead of knowing that what's the reason behind. So that was, for my understanding, that was the best example that how important is the perception for everyone. And being a leader, perception is most important for us. Why? Because being a leader, we are leading so many people, we are influencing a lot of people, so we need to have a right perception. And to have a right perception, we need to somehow manage it, because whenever, like, being a child and getting growing up, our perception is formed, and sometimes we never thought about it, we never give a thought that how it was formed, what are the reasons behind it, and we never like have a consideration about it, how can we have a right perception. That's why being a leader, we need to consider this as a fact that we need to manage our perception rightly. Let's begin with these two pictures. In first picture, you can see that there is one cat which is like showing as a lion in the reflection. So that's just an example of an individual perception, that sometimes the reality is different, or reality in reality the problem is very small, but when you are seeing it as like you are seeing it as a big problem or a very complex way. In the second picture, it's a picture that two people, or more than two people, are seeing one thing differently because they are present at different side of the situation, and none of them is lying or being deceitful for the situation. All of them are truthful, but definitely we would be thinking that other person is lying and we would not understand. So that's also in a group, that how perception and truth could be different for each person separately. Let's begin with the definition of perception. According to a very famous book of a human behavior, they define perception as the complex process by which people select, organize sensory stimulation into a meaningful and rational picture of the world. In a very simple word, you can say perception is the way we all interpret our experiences. And it's not only create our experiences of world around us, but it allows us that how we interact with the environment. It's our interaction, that how we are interacting with our environment, people, community, or team in an organization, and colleagues, etc. And when you talk about perception, then no two people are interacting or experiencing, interpreting sensation and situation in a same way. Definitely, if there are two people, they would interpret in a different way, and they have their own feelings to interpret that situation, and that's feelings, or that all the background factors lead toward forming a perception. How perception is important for a leadership. Having the right perception is actually the significant skill for any effective leadership. It is important for us to understand that perception is often portrayed through communication in any organization or in any community, whether it's big or small. So we need to understand the relationship between perception and how we communicate that perception to other people. And being a leader, that communication is affecting other people, and forming also that what is the vision and mission, and how where we are leading as a leader. So we need to have an accurate self perception is absolutely critical for your success as a leader. You need to have a very clear about it, that what are you leading and what's your plan, what's your vision, and what do you want to lead. Being Whenever we are talking about leadership, most importantly we consider that there are three important skills a leader needs to have. One is leader needs to have vision, leader needs to have a technical skills, leader needs to have some people or interpersonal skills. But we often forget about having a right perception. What does it mean? That leader needs to have a right perception to lead that vision, using those technical knowledge for the people. Having a right perception is not only becoming competent or becoming understanding or empathetic, but also it's nurturing diversity and being able to live with all the people whom you are leading, or being able to live with the cause who are bringing or interacting, making an interaction with the people. If being a leader, let's suppose first of all, you're understanding that there is a perception and you need to recognize that perception and how that perception is influencing your behavior and vision. You need to recognize the uniqueness of that perception. Each individual select, organize and interpret information differently. That you can easily call the diversity. So you need to be very considerate that how employee and manager will perceive whenever you are doing something, and what perception they would have in response to that decision. And you need to interpret that experience is always dependent on their beliefs, attitudes, or whatever they have in their mind. And everyone would definitely have different background, different values, beliefs. So being a leader, first of all, you need to recognize that diversity of people. And because once you would accept that diversity, then you would be able to plan for the inclusion of people. And inclusion of people is always beneficial in terms of leader to lead your mission and reaching your objective. So you need to recognize those values, beliefs, and attitudes and different cultures, that uniqueness of each person, and how you can all bring or align and bring them on for the collective action. In terms of steps, there are three steps for the perceptual process which we have. First step is sensory stimulation. In the sensory stimulation, it most of the time involve your five senses. Let's take an example of like some fragrance. That with some fragrance you have some attached story or attached memory in your mind, and whenever you are smelling that smell, you would be that memory would be recalled in your mind. And that memory could be positive or negative. Let's suppose if it's negative, then your response to a current situation would be influenced by that negative memory. It would be driven by that memory which is not relevant to the current situation in any case, but still it is influenced by that negative memory. Once you have that sensory stimulation of the situation, then there would be organization of that stimulus. What does organization mean? That how, where are you putting that in your brain? Sometimes when you are getting the information, definitely you are not getting like 100% information for from your email or from with the conversation with your colleague, or you're not seeing the situation 100%. There is always a background of a situation. So you fill your gaps in your mind, whatever is the in missing information, you would fill those gaps, telling the people, like in making the story in your mind. That could be wrong, that could be right, but you would do that automatically, and that's a part of the organization of that stimulus. Third is interpreting and expressing. After once you have organized the story in your mind, you would interpret or express that story. What does interpret mean? You might have some other story attached to such type of story. You might have some standard response to some situation, you might have some fears related to the story, and definitely you would interpret that story considering your fears, your background, your other memories, and then you would express your response. It could be like it could be totally the positive or optimistic story, but your response could be negative because you have some negative emotions attached to that story or that scenario in the past. So we need to understand, why do we need to understand this process? That whenever we are going through this process and we are trying to solve the complex situation, we need to be considerate for the process, and where we can be more rational and more clear about the process to control our biases and negative perception. Let's consider this phrase, snake in the grass. Stop for a while. Did you see what really the phrase contained, or did you see what you expected to see? Most of the people would see what they expected to see, and that's a snake in the grass. They would ignore totally that there is like grammatical mistake or the repetition of a one word in this phrase. So they would just focus that there is a snake. That's the alarming, you can say, phrase, that there is a snake in the grass. So they would focus on that situation only, what they wanted to see. They would ignore the other things. That's a very I can say, when most of the people ignore this, that's a very relevant example in terms of perceiving things, and whenever we are getting information, how we process that information. When we talk about the perception, there are various factors which influence that perception process, and here I'm talking about some internal and external. Like it's a mix of internal and external. How would the habit, everyone would have a habit. It could be positive habit, negative habit, and it's not necessary that your positive habit is always putting, like, influencing the situation positively. It could definitely influence it negatively as well. And there is one saying that habits are hard to die as well. So whenever you are perceiving something, your habit would influence that situation, and you would be, I think, subjective if you would be very stick on your habit. Second thing is motivation. Motivational factors increase the individual's sensitivity to any situation when he or she is considering as relevant to satisfaction of their need in past or future. Let's take an example that in past you wanted to be, like, you have some goals in your mind which you could not achieve, but those goals always motivates you. And someone else, if like trying to struggle for those goals, you would be very, I think, have a different response to that situation and helping that person, instead of being truthful and rational about helping, that how you should help that person in that current scenario. Your learnings also influence your perception. Sometimes you have your learning goals, sometimes you are very conservative or you are very rigid in terms of learning process. If you are rigid in terms of learning process, that would somehow hinder the perception and seeing the situation factually. And if you have sometimes the focused, very focused learning goals, then you would somehow ignore or miss the other information which could be very relevant for that situation, but you are so focused on that situation, but that you miss the relevant information, or you miss some important information in that whole big picture. Specialization, that specialization also lead to that we all wanted to be special expert in any field, any of the field, and sometimes want that desire or that goal of being expert, we are not we are not good with the other things. How, like, let's suppose you are very good with the negotiation, but during negotiation you just wanted to win. You don't want to go for the win-win situation. You don't want to be empathetic for the other people. So that only goal that you wanted to win is make you very specialized in your negotiation skills, but on the other hand you are not considerate the needs of the other people. So you are ignoring the other perspective of the, like, uh, collective benefits or the mutual benefits, and you are not leading the situation in a right way. Our social backgrounds also drive our perception in a way that we all are from different social backgrounds, which leads to having a different memories, different type of childhood upbringing, and we would definitely have a different respond to any situation based on our social backgrounds. And it could be our memories or childhood or myths or stories, every it could be anything based on our social backgrounds. It could be related to even a geographical situation as well, that sometimes we are born with in a geographical situation the place who experience usual disasters or climate conditions, then we would be more considerate and we have some emotional attachment for the climate change issues. But the person who is born with all the facilities and living in a very healthy condition might not have that consideration for the climate issues. So our social backgrounds always influence our perception process. There's a one term called unintentional blindness. What does this mean? Is a failure of a person to perceive objects that are there because their attention is so focused elsewhere. Inattentional blindness occurs even when the object of interest is momentarily obscured by something of importance that would have been noticed had the observer been more generally aware. Let's try to make it simple with an example that you entered in a cinema hall and it's like you are late, you're already late. You would be very focused to find a seat, and in very that focused scenario you just you just ignore or you just miss your friend who is waving a hand towards you and trying that he might have he might have a seat for you, but you just could not see. That's your blindness, because you are focused on finding a seat for yourself, so you are blind to the other factors around you. How can you manage your perception being a leader? Being a leader, you need to be self-aware. What does self-awareness mean? Yeah, yet you need to be very clear about your background, your culture, your myths, that what is your background, from where you belong, what is your uh, you can say the theory or philosophy of life, what are your beliefs, what are your norms. When you would be self aware about your beliefs, norms and living style, even habits, you would try to control and not influence those in any situation. So you would try to be more rational and more factual for any situation instead of those factors driving your response. Well, once you are self-aware, you would try to be open. What does openness mean? That you would be open for the different perception. When you would recognize that unique perception of other people, you would be open for the uniqueness of perception. And in any given or complex situation, you would recognize that perception, and you would somehow try to address those in making any decision in life. You would be sensitive to response and reaction of other people for any given situation. You would be very sensitive to the need of other people, that what do they expect from this given situation, how they are involved, what emotions are attached, and what on any decision, on any action, what could be the possible reaction from other people. This leads to having a sensitivity to diversity and uniqueness, that you would be very sensitive for the diversity, and your any action would lead toward the inclusion of maximum people instead of excluding few people. Whenever you are in any complex, being a leader in a complex or dynamic situation and you need to decide, you can use this principle. You can step back and remember this principle of cobra. What does cobra mean? You can concentrate how to know more about the situation, that what are the facts, what are the backgrounds, how other person perception is playing role in the whole situation, and you could be more rational, factual, having very clear numbers or qualitative research about it, what is the background and all these details. The second point is one thing at a time. You should always, whenever you are in a complex situation, you would focus on one thing on a one time instead of focus on multiple things, because when you are focusing on multiple things, your response might be influenced by the other things you are right now going through. So it's better to focus on one thing when the decision or action is very crucial for other people. Take a break whenever you are, let's say example of a conflict. If you are in a conflict with a group of people in a meeting or anywhere, it's a very I would say effective strategy to take a break. You can have a restroom break, tea break, or anything. It just get out of that scenario and that crucial or the conflictory environment, and take everyone would take a step back and think like, okay, what they are doing, what do they need to do, and how they can come to some common agenda or common points. So this is very effective strategy for any conflict and for any complex situation. Realign. Always realign. How did sometimes we have expectations for a certain condition, and those expectations are not, if they are not met, then we have an adverse reaction to the situation. So always in your mind realign, that is my response is influenced by my expectation, or is this a very rational or a realistic response which I should give in a given scenario to move forward. So you need to realign in your mind at what's the situation and what should you do. The last point is ask someone whenever the situation is, it depends on the complexity of situation. And second thing I would like to highlight, that it's not that you are doubting your decision or you are doubting your decision power. It's just taking another opinion to validate that what you thinking, is that it right or not. And I would say that validation is always good for, because if late on later stage you identify that this was not a good decision or idea, then you would regret it. And instead of regretting, I would say that ask someone, take another people opinion, that how this solution is solving the problem in an effective and efficient way. You can also follow the rule of a clear, precise, and objective, that in any situation or scenario, you can try to be as clear as possible. You can be precise. You, instead of going through in a long stories or long backgrounds, etc., you can be precise which information is vital for the situation and which is information is just creating a buzz or creating a misleading response. You need to be very objective for anything. Your subjectivity, it's not possible, I would say, to be 100% objective being a leader, but we can try always to be objective as much as possible to manage our perception, because when we would try to be objective, then our response would not be influenced by our perception or any background or anything. I would like to conclude my presentation with this saying of Amy Harman, that if you sharpen your perception, you will change your life. It means that if you would be very careful at how you perceive things, how you go with the process of receiving, and how that perception drive your response, you would change your life, you would change your personal and professional life, and the outcome would be positive in a way. So that's it.
Thank you so
Uh,
much, Freeha. I really enjoyed
Thank
the
you, Ans.
webinar.
Thank you very much, Ans.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.